Hello world, welcome to the 205th climate change emergency protest here in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. It is November 11th, 2022. Next week will be the 206th climate change emergency protest, and hopefully I'll be out on the battlefield or in town or somewhere on location to be revealed later. But right now you're looking at our front yard, Tanya's and mine, and those in the desert, you're probably not used to seeing this kind of thing. The things on the ground are leaves from the trees, and the trees here lose their leaves in the fall, and then they get them back in April or May. And what it allows is sunshine to reach the house and everything during the winters, much needed heating source. But this is what our yard looks like when things are left alone. Now I'm going to pick up the leaves eventually once they degrade a little bit, and put them in a compost heap, and then we reuse them that way, and then it reinvigorates the garden and everywhere else. We use the dirt. We do compost, and from organic materials that we use during the day, and it ends up being dirt once the worms get at it and other bugs and everything else. So right now we're in the middle of a drought, believe it or not, and it's going to rain 1.5 inches. So this is the first significant rain we've had in months. So that'll be pretty nice. And if you look at the USA Drought Monitor, you can tell that almost all the United States, except for Maine and Rhode Island, are in severe drought. Also Alaska. But it's unbelievable to look at. You look at USA Drought Monitor. Also, before I go on, Al Gore did a presentation at COP27, and it's called Climate Trace. It's really a good, looks like it has really good potentials for tracing all sorts of stuff, and as far as climate goes, like methane and whatnot that countries produce, or even industries produce, or gas and oil fields around the world. So that's called Climate Trace, and I think the USA came up with a new satellite. It's called Mars, but it's actually methane something detection system. So that might be worth checking out too online. It detects methane around the world, and hopefully that'll lead to improvement as to capping off wells and things like that, and also catch the cheaters that are saying that they're only doing so much methane per day or per year, and in reality they're probably doing 4 times as much. Methane is escaping from the fracking wells and places like that. So this is number 205. I'm going to go back under cover here in a minute, and because it's raining pretty good. Right now, there's total silence from the media concerning the COP27 conference. Many of you don't even know it's happening. You talk to people and it's like, what? What's that called? COP27? Never heard of it. So it's a conference in Egypt right now. It's different locations around the world every year, sadly, because they can't get their stuff together to actually solve the climate problem, and they have no intention of doing that. But it's the climate conference of all the countries around the world, and they're meeting in Egypt this time, and the media has total silence in the United States about it, not reporting it at all. You look at the ABC, NBC, CBS, Fox Television, things like that, there's no reporting about this. They're doing stupid stuff, and things that seem very important to the ordinary citizen are not going to be that important this year coming up in 2023 and for the rest of our lives. And they're totally missing the ball, and this is really criminal and sinister. They know what's going on. They have to, those in charge, producers and the people in charge of the media. But nope, they want to do sensational coverage of what's happening. And you're being fooled if you're watching the USA media, the top 3, top 4, top 5 syndicated news broadcasts, and also your newspapers. You're being fooled. Right now, we're in the fight of our lives. And things are going to come to a head very quickly, and by then it's too late by the time you wake up as to what's happening. Or you might not even ever know why this is happening, why things are spinning out of control, and why there's suddenly no food and it's too hot, too wet, too this, too that, and you won't even know what happened to you and why your family's dying and things like that. You deserve to know what's going on in the world as far as climate change goes. And you're being absolutely fooled. If you are staying on the 3 networks and getting all your news from there, you're being fooled. You need to go to YouTube, check out climate change, check out COP27, start expanding your horizons. There are many broadcasts out there. Environmental Coffee House, Paul Beckwith, Peter Carter, Roger Hallam, things like that. And you need to have it explained to you as to what's happening in the world right now. And these aren't crackpots. This is why you're seeing all this weird weather and everything going on right now. And when I started doing this, I was looked upon as being a lunatic and called all sorts of names by friends and family, in fact. And right now the chickens are coming home to roost, and I hate to say it, but you were wrong, and y'all need to get off your duff and start doing stuff and being proactive, doing these types of broadcasts, talking to friends and family, putting pressure on your politicians is the main thing. Just had an election in the United States, and especially here in Pennsylvania. The two people that were elected for governor and senator are frackers. Okay, there's no reason for fracking right now. No new fracking, no new nothing concerning fossil fuels. We have more than enough to kill us over and over again, and they're not controlling it, and they're appeasing the public, and they want lower gas prices. I get it, but lower gas prices won't help you when you're starving to death. Lower gas prices won't help you when you're boiling to death. You know, it's entirely possible here next year we'll have temperatures 105, 110, 118. This happens, and it won't be survivable, especially when the grid goes down. You get a combination of heat bulb or wet bulb effect, which is the heat and humidity combined, and it's going to be severe, and it's going to be dramatic, and people won't know why it's happening. I'm telling you, please get off your networks. Go to YouTube, go to Al Jazeera, go to different sources, Africa News, things like that, and wake up. There's a whole world out there in the United States, and I'm doing this for my friends in the world, and I probably have more friends right now elsewhere around the whole world. In fact, I know that for a fact. I said that to Tanya many times. I've got more people friending me in other countries, especially in the developing world, than I have here locally. So it's kind of crazy, you know, what's going on. So I commend you all people around the world. You know, you're very much more worldly than the local people here, and it's crazy as to what's happening. So I'm going to talk about several solutions. This isn't going to be a you know, pointing fingers and things like that. These are solutions that I just spitballed. I'd come up with these solutions within a half hour. Possible things we could do, possible the country could do, possible things the world could do. And it looks like it's a long video, but hang in there, you know, cut it halfway, stop, and then come back to it if it's too long for you when you're driving your car or working around the house. This is not some visual thing, so you can listen to it as you walk around the house with earphones on or whatever. But they're pretty good solutions, some of them, and there are many more solutions than what I'm suggesting. We really need groups to get together for cities and states and come up with solutions as to how to mitigate and adapt to the situation. If you can't mitigate a situation, it ends up being adaptation. And the sad part is you cannot adapt to climate change. It's going to spin out of control. Tipping points are being crossed or have been crossed. For example, back when carbon dioxide was 400 parts per million, now it's 420 parts per million. Now, understand there's a 10 to 30 year time lag between carbon dioxide in the atmosphere and temperatures catching up. So we're living back in the year 2000 or even 1990 as far as carbon dioxide, and we've got a whole lot of problems built into what's coming. But 4 million years ago, when carbon dioxide was 400 parts per million, temperatures were 3 degrees Celsius hotter than the pre-industrial levels. So right now we're at 1.1 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels, supposedly. We'll just take them at those numbers. 1.1, we've got baked in 3 degrees Celsius. So all these, it doesn't sound like a lot, but this is catastrophic. You hit 1.5, that's catastrophic. 2.0 degrees above pre-industrial levels, temperature-wise, Celsius. I don't think we're going to survive. So it took millions of years to get to that point. The temperatures went up slowly. However, we're doing this in a matter of years, not dozens of years. We're doing it now in a matter of years. Things are going to approach a tipping point, or have approached a tipping point. And I'll talk about tipping points in another show because that'll take forever. But you know, 3 degrees Celsius higher. Oceans were 70 feet higher, 70 to 80 feet higher when carbon dioxide was 400 parts per million. We're at 420. Okay, are you getting this? If you go to Newsroom back in 2000, there's a program. Go on YouTube, type in Newsroom-climate change episode. Bring that up. It's very accurate. They did it 8-10 years ago, and it was so accurate right now as to what's happening. It's very interesting to watch. There are a lot of things like that out there that happened years ago, and it's like, wow, they knew what they were talking about way ahead before they even knew they were talking about it. So I'm going to talk to you about solutions and things like this, but understand this. This COP conference is our last chance for unified action. The delegates are going to go home, countries are going to go home, and they're all wrapped up in the Ukraine war and trying to blame that for everything. Yeah, it's a big issue, but survival is a bigger issue, and we need to come up with solutions as to what's going on. Uh, Yelping about the Ukraine issue and Russian issue won't help people right now that are drowning, starving to death. Horn of Africa, starving to death. Floods in Nigeria, floods in Pakistan. 1/3 of Pakistan was underwater. 30-some million people affected. The Horn of Africa, Kenya, Somalia, and Ethiopia. one person's dying every 39 seconds from starvation right now. Millions of people are in jeopardy. Millions of people. Can you imagine that in the United States if millions of people were in jeopardy? The fact is, though, there are 350 million people in the United States in jeopardy right now, and they don't even know it. So there are very few that understand what's happening and can connect the dots beyond today's election and tomorrow's this or that. So, you got to wake up as to what's happening and become more worldly, please, because this is ridiculous. You can't have a conversation with anybody because everyone's in the kindergarten stage, and you really need to get up to doctorate level as to what's happening. And it doesn't require a whole lot. Just paying attention. Get into broadcasts that are other than your network stuff that they're spoon feeding you. Quit being lazy. Get out. Stop being childish. These are the tough times, and we're going to suffer immensely, mentally and physically, what's going on. But you owe it to the next generations and the next 50 generations as to what's happening. So 3 million years ago, okay, I'm going to come up with solutions then, and enjoy the view around outside our house. And here we go. So I'm going to do the obvious ones: wind, solar, nukes for renewables and possible solutions. Let's see, fuel economy standards for automobiles and things like that. More efficient electric grid, a more efficient electrical grid. Now we're getting into more nitty-gritty stuff. Plant trees around the area, bamboo forests, shallow wetlands. That's kind of interesting. A shallow wetland is where you create a shallow wetland out of water. You dig a slight pit or you use what's available, and then from that pit you fill it with water or allow water to fill in, and then eventually what happens is over time it becomes a meadow. It starts filling in itself because everything eventually destroys itself. So the wetland becomes too prolific. The bacteria eat up everything and things collapse into the wetland. It becomes a meadow, and eventually the meadow becomes a forest. So it's a renewable resource there. Bicycle lanes, obviously, towns need bicycle lanes. Hempcrete, we need to look into that. Electric bicycle subsidies, okay? Now everyone's going to talk about batteries, and yeah, we need to come up with technology other than using metal for batteries. Evidently, a lot of organizations, and you know who, fossil fuels, who owns the patents to a lot of these battery technologies, and they're sitting on them. They don't want to get out about electric possibilities, and I can't imagine that batteries always require metal. And if we can get a renewable resource for batteries, everything can take off the way it should as far as getting forward with electricity. Otherwise, this electric idea won't work either because you're going to run out of metals. It's a finite resource. You need renewable resources like bamboo, hemp, things like that for batteries. For houses, if you cut a slit in the top of houses, you can put up what I call chef's hats. It's these, they're about yay big and they spin. It's a fan blade. It's a dome type thing. And the heat from the attic goes up into the chef's hat and spins them. And you can generate small amounts of electricity, feed it into the grid. And if every house had 3 of them, you'd have a massive amount of electricity being generated. Solar shingles, rather than asphalt shingles, how about solar shingles? Paint houses white, with the upcoming heat. Lighter colors is what wins, not dark colors. Hempcrete, as I talked about. Bamboo wood for house building, not using wood from Brazil and things like that. That would slow down the deforestation, or it needs to stop entirely, actually. We need to reforest all these places. Net shading. Put nets around houses in areas that you can that are extremely hot, or use sails, some sort of tarps or whatever that could reflect the sun or not allow the sun to get on the house. So therefore, the house doesn't heat up and you don't need to use as much electricity. Green roofs. Back in the day, the settlers out west would use sod houses and things like that, but they had green roofs with grass growing on top. That's one thing to consider also for housing. Buildings could have green roofs as well, such as plants and grass, trees, things like that on the balconies and also on the roofs themselves. Reflective windows in all buildings, no longer letting the sun come in. Paint all buildings white or a lighter color as well. Use hempcrete for the buildings as well as for, instead of cement. Cement is a huge greenhouse gas. People don't know it, but it's gigantic. It puts out a terrific amount of carbon dioxide. And if that was a country, I think it'd be number 4 or 3 in the world as far as the country goes, just the cement curing. Green terraces, as I said, you could have plants on all terraces. How about this? Put netting around the houses and buildings and have English ivy, something that's permanently green, evergreen plants. And the English ivy would take in the sunlight, but it wouldn't get to the houses or the building as well. And you put the netting around so that the English ivy doesn't dig into the house, that way. Let it hold on to the netting or the structure, such as bamboo, things like that, interwoven. Okay, so this is big for the towns. This is, I was just spitballing, and it took me 20 minutes at the most, and you should have groups getting together in all towns to come up with ideas kind of like this. Not very hard, though. Tree planting in town, massive tree planting. Green corridors, east-west, north-south, northeast to southwest, whatever. For corridors, that you have areas of green that would help towns out and stay cool. Meetings for ideas, as I said. Below-ground electricity. I know it costs a lot of money to put stuff below ground, but I do believe that once you bury the wires and everything below ground, they last a huge amount longer, 5 times, 10 times, 20 times longer than they do above. And they're not susceptible then to wind damage and hurricanes and trees falling on them. But you do have to ensure that they don't get soaking wet because electricity and water don't mix too well. Below ground electricity, as I said, gardens. Encourage everyone to have gardens. Encourage everyone, as we did here, for example, Tanya and I, we dug up all of our grass. So we don't own a lawnmower. Here in the United States, people around the world, people have grass. They have lawns and things like that, and they mow once, twice a week. And what that requires is a lawnmower, and that puts a massive amount of pollution into the air as well as burning up gasoline. So you dig up your lawn. Basically, it's maintenance free, and of course, you have to keep up with it and put compost around or different things to keep the weeds down, but it's kind of nice. It's good therapy to go out there and relax and meditate and while you're working in the garden. Basically, our yard is a garden, and it's like a Garden of Eden. It's really, really fantastic. But we don't own a lawnmower anymore. We just put plants everywhere. Let's see here. Chickens and bees. Encourage towns to allow residents to have chickens and bees. Chickens put out when they go to the bathroom. You can put that in the compost and use that to degrade, and then it becomes soil once again. But it also is a renewable resource in that the bees help pollinate flowers and things like that, and chickens help give free eggs to everyone. All right, flowers. Have massive flower planting campaigns throughout towns as well. Car-free zones. Zermatt, Switzerland, for example, has only electric cars in the town. We need that if we're going to have cars at all, but we also need car-free zones where you just block cars off from going downtown. That would cut down on emissions, also cut down on heating, cut down on noise, and would promote tourism, things like that, because people can walk freely downtowns and stuff. Shuttles. Have consistent shuttles, not these buses. Gettysburg has attempted shuttles before, shuttle buses, but they're sporadic. There's no posted times on the bus stop signs as to what time they're going to arrive. You don't know where they're going, so they need not only consistent times, they need to have a map as to where they're going and show where their stops are. New York City is a good example of what's right about it, and they have a listing of what the bus line is, what time they arrive, and where they're going, where their route is, and whether express or not. So you need postings, as I said. Light rail in towns, things like that. Baltimore, for example, Maryland has light rail system. Works pretty well. The only problem is it's static, so you can't go. You have to go to a light rail stop and get off there. It's not like a streetcar. So the old-fashioned streetcars, as I talked about in the previous broadcast, was that my dad, for example, would would ride the train when he would visit my mom before they got married. He would go from Philadelphia area, ride the train to Lancaster, Pennsylvania, and then take a streetcar all the way from Lancaster, Pennsylvania to York, Pennsylvania. And then, the streetcars were so prevalent, they would dump off somewhere near her house. So that's something to consider. Electric streetcars within towns. When I was a kid, we lived in Pittsburgh, and you had streetcars with rail lines in the streets and electric above, and the streetcars would go throughout the town. As far as transportation goes, so that was really wonderful. You could go anywhere within the town. Fleet-only town areas. As I said. Or electric car only town areas. Zermatt, Switzerland is a great example. But I kind of have this idea, which is kind of a different thought process, is have electric car lots. Okay, you got these self-driving cars now, theoretically, if they develop them properly. You'd have satellite lots around towns. And if you need an electric car, you just punch up, please come pick me up. The car starts up, comes in, picks you up in town, and then takes you wherever you want. Therefore, you don't have to park downtown, or you can, it will take you out to where you want to go, or deliver you somewhere else throughout the region, So satellite lots would be great, self-driving. Electric scooters, a lot of towns, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania has that, for example. A lot of towns do, where you just rent an electric scooter and you drive around town. Younger people really love doing that, and cuts down on the need for cars. Let's see here. Bypasses. Bypasses around towns are great. As I said, it makes car-only areas, or car-restricted areas for that. Population planting and cleanup. In Gettysburg, for example, they have a real potential. And if they would call for town get-togethers and just have massive tree planting campaigns throughout the town, it would really work wonders. There's a local guy that does tree planting out at Recreation Park here in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, which is really great. Let's see, rain cisterns. Obviously, some towns like Las Vegas that need rain, they have cisterns where if it rains a little bit, it channels the water, and all of a sudden you got a massive amount of rain going into these cisterns that you can use rainwater for various things. Gray water. We do this occasionally when it's really hot out. Our sink water, what we do is not the soap water, but when you're cleaning dishes and things like that, you put it into a bucket, and then you take the bucket and dump it outside on trees and plants and things like that. It's amazing how much water per day that you can dump outside. Above toilet sinks. Japan has this where you have sinks that are above the toilet before the water goes into the toilet. So you're not using toilet water, you're using regular water, but to wash your hands and things like that. And it's basically reusable then. You wash your hands, it goes into the toilet reservoir, and then when you flush the toilet, that water you already used gets used again to flush away the waste products. However, there's a better solution, which is toilets that are compostable. They have that technology out in that right now. And the idea of putting water using to flush away your waste is kind of ridiculous, in that we could be using it to recompost, especially urine and things like that. And, rather than flushing it into our water systems, and then we got to drink the water somehow. People downstream, God help them. Community cars. Cars, for example, sit for hours or days and they don't get used. Everyone has a car, 2 cars, 3 cars, 4 cars, things like that, 1 car, and it will sit there for days and it's not being used. So, like 22 hours a day, it just sits, and then use it for 3 hours a day. Well, we could have community cars, or even a combination of the car satellite system where they come and pick you up. But you could just have a car in the neighborhoods, and everyone, or government subsidized cars that are available for everyone, that you, instead of having 2 cars, you only need 1 car then. If you can pick up a car in the neighborhood, walk up to it, and kind of like the old Zip car you used to have. I haven't seen one of them in town in years. They used to have them at the Gettysburg College. Eliminate natural gas. And any new construction should not have natural gas. Natural gas, it's a clean gas. Yeah, but it's also methane. And methane initially for the first 2 years is 162 times more potent than carbon dioxide. And after the 2 years to 20 years, it's 80 times more potent as greenhouse gas. And it can last up to 100 years. And at that point, it's like 20 times more potent as greenhouse gas. So using natural gas, which is methane, as I said, and Pennsylvania is number 2 in the country in fracking for natural gas. And that's why these two, the senator and both senators now and the governor, it's so upsetting to me that people actually voted for people, and I realize that it's your political party, blah 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 blah. But what's happening is that if you're a fracking proponent, you're not going to get away from climate change. Methane, they need to change their path, and this is why we need to keep pressure on them now to reverse their position on fracking. You need to get rid of that position as far as consistent fracking. So eliminate natural gas, no new construction of natural gas for houses, water heaters, stoves, things like that. Also big buildings, no new natural gas use, only electricity. Risk assessments. Towns need risk assessments. Floods, fires, hurricanes, and heat. Obviously, you think they do it, but a lot of towns are still getting decimated by all these events happening. So obviously, there is not a risk assessment going on with these towns. The town councils and town mayors need to get together and come up with a solution rather than sitting there like a deer in the headlights and getting hit head on by these climate change happenings that are happening. Okay, so highways. This is just spitballing. This is stuff I did in a half hour. Uh, 2 lanes to 1. Okay, we have many highways here, interstate highway systems that have 2 lanes going every which way. What you do is you make this very painful, and you have 1 lane that is strictly for electric car use, or I'll come up with those solutions here in a second, or light rail. Okay, the bed of the highway is already constructed. You could put light rail on the 2nd lane and have light rail that goes zipping by while everyone's sitting in traffic going, doggone it, I wish I was on the mass transit system now. So what you end up with, Elon Musk, and not that I'm a big fan, but the driverless car technology, you could have electric trains where these cars just pick you up at a satellite spot, take you onto the highway system now that you have 1 lane dedicated just to electric cars and go unlimited fast speeds, and they'll take you down to where you work, and no longer do you have train stations. The electric cars break off from the trains, these electric car trains, and take you to your place where you want to go, whether it's work or shopping or whatever else. So that's something to consider. So you just type in where you're going, the car picks you up, puts you on the highway, breaks off again, takes you to where you want to go. Release of car battery patents. As I said, I've heard stories of fossil fuel industry is sitting on top of these these battery patents, and there's ways to do it other than pure metal. And I don't know if that's true or not, but you would think it would be. The government has unlimited funds. We can blow the crap out of someone and spend 50% of our discretionary funds for military, plus another 10% on veterans once they come back. Wouldn't that money be better spent around the world as far as people go and countries go, rather than trying to blow the crap each other and trying to kill each other? How about we figure out ways to not kill each other, and that would be through climate technology. We need to get over this country border thing, Ukraine, Russia, United States, Mexico, things like that, and realize that we're all connected. And as far as I know, climate change does not stop at any one border. So we got to think about things like that, think outside the box. Massive trees planting in parks. Gettysburg battlefield, I've shown videos already where there's open areas on the battlefield. It has 8,000 acres on the Gettysburg battlefield. They've ripped down a lot so that people can view the Civil War and what happened on the battlefield here. We need to get over that. Put a placard up, use your cell phones. This happened here, this happened there. We need to have massive tree planting campaigns now, as far as no longer open areas, and replant what we already destroyed. And it has to be not monoculture trees planting around towns and everywhere else. You need varieties of trees because, for example, oak trees here are being attacked by insects. So you're not going to have any oak trees in this area pretty soon, the way things are going. You need to have bamboo forests. If you want something to grow quickly, bamboo forests would work wonderfully around here and everywhere else. Multi-level forests, things that people don't think about. Instead of monoculture forests, how about low, you have many varieties of forests, but also you have a thought process where you put in plants that grow low, plants that grow medium, high, and then you have the forest, which is extremely high. Nature-based solutions. We need to come up with solutions that are all nature-based, thought process about that. Whenever you're going to do something, make it nature-based as far as what's going on. And, the solutions have to be in cooperation with nature and using nature, such as we're doing out front here, which is multi-level and also multifunctional, in that worms and bees and everything else can use our garden area when the flowers are out, and the worms are always here. And, it's a win-win situation, because then the birds come, eat the worms. I mean, it's a whole thing going on. Education. I'd love to have education in school about climate change, but so few people actually know what's happening. We need actual. So instead of one teacher teaching climate change to their students, how about in this day of media, you have assemblies and things like that, or broadcasts to the classrooms, where one person who is very knowledgeable about climate change actually broadcasts to several classrooms or several schools. Some universities do that. They're so big that they have one professor talking to three classrooms at once. But we need people that are actually knowledgeable what's happening. They need to tell the honest truth of what's happening. We all need to grow up, stop being childish, and actually hear the truth as to what the dire situation is. Andrew Guterres, the Secretary General of the United Nations, said that we're on the road to climate change hell. We've got our footer on the acceleration rather than on the brake, accelerator rather than on the brake to mitigate and stop climate change, and we're not doing it, and things are just getting worse and worse. Instead of on a path to 1.5 degrees and turn around, which is also devastating. We can't survive 1.5 degree increase, but instead of stopping there, we're going through that. And even the IPCC, Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, is now saying that we're projected to go to 2.8 degrees Celsius. We won't be around after that when that happens. That's absolute extinction event. But if we're on a path to 2.8, and that's the lowest common denominator, what they agreed to, that means we're on a path to 5 degrees Celsius. And if we're on a path to 5 degrees Celsius with feedback loops and things like that, we're on a path to 10 degrees Celsius. We're going to be in a hothouse Earth. And as I talked before, Earth is in the cold part of the Goldilocks zone, and Mars is on the cold part of the Goldilocks zone. Earth is on the warm part of the Goldilocks zone, meaning it's good for life, and life can promulgate in those areas. So we're pushing ourselves out of the warm part of the Goldilocks zone into the hot part of the Goldilocks zone, and we're not going to survive this if we keep on this path. Oceans, we need to replant the oceans. As dumb as that sounds, mangroves, coral reefs, things like that. We need to consider iron oxide in specific areas to cause algae bloom, which then gets rid of carbon in the atmosphere and sinks down to the bottom of the ocean. Omtech, people poo-poo this guy, but it's Patrick McNulty. And he came up with this thing called OMTech, which is pretty good technology. You look at OMTEC. The government has not provided him with any money. And we need to encourage others to come up with solutions that can spitball or do things through engineering and try to figure out how to get us out of this situation. So not everything's just strictly nature. We're going to have to use some technology to get us out of this situation as well. Geoengineering. People are proposing the Mirror Project, sulfur in the atmosphere, sulfur dioxide in the atmosphere, who knows what. Anyways, this could go horribly wrong. Whenever you introduce a new technology into humanity or around the world, things have side spin-offs and effects that you don't realize side effects as to what can happen as a result of that. The potentialities with geoengineering, which is blotting out the sun from the atmosphere, is a way around it. It's like Cliff Notes rather than studying the book. It doesn't reduce anything in the atmosphere. It buys you time, sort of, but you have to keep it up then forever as far as geoengineering. And it's what it can do. The bad side effects could be wind changes, rain pattern changes, things like that. And also plants require sun. So if you blot out the sun, you're going to have starvation. So you could end up with droughts and all sorts of weird things happening as a result of that. We're too dumb as people go to be able to do that carte blanche. No subsidies for oil, gas, and coal industries. They're making record profits right now. And what they should do with the oil, gas, and coal industries when they're making record profits like this is take 20% of the record profits, send them back to developing nations, and use that money that they're sending to get renewable technology going in those nations. Also, 10% back to consumers here in the United States and also in the developed nations that they have to apply towards renewable technologies. So it'd be 10% towards cars and things like that, purchases. We're coming to the end here, so hang in there. As I said, take a pause and then come back in. I got a lot of good ideas here, I think. So we need a system overhaul of the whole system. Instead of gross domestic product, that's constant growth. How much did we grow this year? 3%, 2%. Everyone freaks out we're not growing. Get out of that mindset. This capitalistic system we're using right now does not work. Capitalism works to a certain extent, but we also need a degree of socialism and take care of each other. But we need gross happiness product, GHP, not GDP. whether to make a community happier, such as, all these solutions came up with to make a community much more happier than going to work and slaving away and then going back home and then going to work and slaving away, coming back home. Endless growth on a finite planet will not work. You're burning up all your resources, and it will collapse in time. That's called a cancer. You're outstripping your resources. It's called overshoot. It's too late at that point. I think right now we've by far overshot our ability of nature to carry us all. So that, when you overshoot your water situation, you drain your aquifers down. Soil depletion, everyone's talking about fertilizer. We don't have fertilizer. Well, why do you need fertilizer? Because you've now ruined the soil. And if you used composting and things like that and put it back into the soil, you wouldn't need so much so-called fertilizer. Minerals, we're digging up metal technology everywhere, lithium and whatnot, to run our batteries, car batteries, and it has a certain point where it's going to stop as well. Telecommute, we need to encourage telecommuting to work more than people driving their cars, throwing their bodies in a chair and then driving back home at the end of the day. We need health activities. This is all part of climate change. Trails, bike trails, hiking trails, things like that, and not solid trails. You need to have like dirt or crushed stone, things like that. Bike lanes throughout towns. You need to get over this car thing and have bike lanes in the towns. Encourage electrical bicycles too. Not everyone can pedal, 3 miles into a town, but you can ride an electric bicycle as far, as well. Home broadcasts, with as far as exercise programs too. Hey, we're gonna meet online and do our exercise program here. Not everyone can get into, obviously taking your body in is also a waste of energy as well. Reforest the Amazon and Congo, Indonesia, Northwest United States, other places. Here in Gettysburg, on the battlefields, have said they should reforest that. It used to be a massive forest. They said when the settlers first arrived in the United States that a squirrel could go from the Atlantic coast, all the way to the Mississippi River and never touch the ground. So reforesting is extremely important. No rebuilding in high-risk areas, such as the Florida coast right now, just got hit by Hurricane Nicole right after Hurricane Ian. No rebuilding. Once your thing goes, no rebuilding. We're not paying for it. We'll give you money to leave and resettle somewhere else. Insurance companies should not cover any future places where they're building as well, going, hey, this is a high-risk area, and we're not going to insure your building at all. And in fact, you are now banned from building in these high-risk areas because you're putting everything in jeopardy at this point. Land use, no expansion for farmlands into natural areas. No more ripping down the forest. Use what we have, and in fact, reforest those areas for that. Food should be direct use food. Less food growing for beef, cattle, and things like that. We have fields here. It looks like it's really wonderful, growing corn. The problem is that the corn is field corn. It's not reusable corn that we can eat. It has to go to the beef, and then the beef eat it and consume massive amounts of water, put methane in the atmosphere with their farting and belching and things like that. And, it's a climate change nightmare. We also have sorghum fields. Now, places in Africa actually use sorghum, but in the United States, we don't use sorghum at all, other than for cattle feed. And we need to stop that and use fields just strictly for food to consume, and if we don't consume it, then ship it around the world. There's plenty of starving people around. As I said, no insurance company for rebuilding in dangerous areas. Bank loans to rewild, or government grants to rewild and to use technology, environmental or natural-based solutions, such as planting here. We didn't get any help for all these plants that we spent tons of money on to, once we put them in, everything's fine, but the initial cost startup is exorbitant. Private groups, educate, sponsorship of, towns need to sponsor and encourage private groups to invest in towns. So this downtown brought to you by whatever organization, and as far as tree planting and gardens and things like that. Encourage rewilding of countries that are suffering climate change right now, such as Central America and things like that. And granted, maybe if you rewild and restore things back to the way they were, things will be okay. But we've gone to the point where a lot of these countries are uninhabitable now, and people are leaving their countries and migrating out in order to find a better life. And how in the world, as a Christian nation or a Muslim nation or a Hindu nation or any nation, reject people that are looking for help? and looking to live somewhere. You know, we could house 20 people in our backyard. It's not even a big backyard, but they'd be happy with that temporarily. And you know, the governments of the world are trying to build walls rather than open borders, and it makes no sense at all as to how we're treating others. Now, a big solution to control population, and this is something no one ever thinks about, and China did that briefly, and they actually had a population reduction, was that for every 2 people, you have 1 child. Okay, if you already had a child, you can't have any more. You shouldn't have any more. It's irresponsible. But if everyone just had 1 child for every 2 people, in 1 generation, the population of the Earth, instead of being 8 billion, would drop down to 4 billion. You know, think about that. So you'd have an automatic population reduction over time, and it would take dramatic effect. One of the biggest climate change effectors is a child being born. You know, people, especially in the United States or the developed world, people consume a huge amount of resources throughout their lives. And if you had a population reduction down to 1/2 of, you know, instead of 2 kids or 4 kids, just 1 child, you would have a savings of a huge amount of resources, and we could, you know, start getting this climate change issue well in hand. So don't forget to look at COP27 online. As I said, go to Paul Beckwith, Environmental Coffee House, Peter Carter, Roger Hallam online on YouTube. Go down my webpage. I got tons of stuff. And, you know, Tanya's been very kind and going with me on this climate change issue. And she's very, very intelligent as far as climate change goes. No one ever talks to her as well about it. And definitely no one ever talks to me about it. And it's very disconcerting to go through life and know so much as to what's happening. And people are too timid or really don't care. They think their lives about this last election was an example of the issues that were involved. Very important, but in the long-term, you know, effect of things, it really isn't. People will forget about it in about 2 or 3 years when the real stuff starts happening, and they'll wonder why they spent so much time focused on this one issue or another, and not the very issue of climate change. So I'll catch you next week, and hopefully I'll be on location or here or wherever else, and I'll see you later. Bye.